Okay, so hopefully everybody can hear me. Right now we've got 8 people logged on, so hopefully a few others will be logging on here pretty quickly. And so today, the main thing we want to talk about is macros. So this is chapter 16 in your current book. And so we're going to kind of talk about what a macro is and how it is different from a normal Teach Pendant program and some of the options that we can do with that. And then we're also going to look at some of the other miscellaneous instructions. I believe we talked about most of them in there, but we'll kind of go through those and then see if you have any questions on anything. So if you have any questions, you can just type them into the chat window there, or you know, turn on your microphone to ask your question if you have a microphone attached, but please keep the microphones off unless you're asking a question, because they tend to pick up extra noise. So all right, so today we're going to be talking about macros, and before I get there, you see here I have the Teach Pendant, and it's set up with a dual screen on there. So I just kind of want to remind you about that. I'm going to kind of be flipping back and forth there a little bit. So if you hit the shift, so you press and hold shift and hit the display button, right, which is right below it. And then you can select either single screen or double screen, okay? And so today what I did to start off with is I just created a couple of programs that I'm going to be using. So the first program here is a program that it basically goes around the rectangle, and then it's going to make a call. So if you remember, we talked about branching back before spring break. We were talking about branching, and we talked about how we can make a call to some other program. All right, so I'm making a call to the program called count up. MC is for macro. So this program here called counts up. It doesn't really count up, but I'll show you what it does here in a minute. But anyhow, so this program kind of walks around the rectangle, calls this count up program, waits 1.2 seconds, and then it goes around the rectangle again, and then it calls a countdown program, and then waits another 1.2 seconds, and then it jumps back up to label 1, which is at the beginning of the program there, and does it again. So I'm going to flip screens here for a minute. I'm going to flip over to the main robot screen so we can just see this, and I'm just going to run the application just so that you have in your mind what the program looks like as it's running. Okay, so here is the main program, and I guess maybe I'll try to pop the Teach Pendant back in here for a minute if I can. And so you can kind of watch this run. Problem is it doesn't quite fit on my screen, so I can't get it to all the keys when I have the Teach Pendant in there. All right, so I'm going to hit forward, and I'm just going to step through the program. And so, you know, when you change your line number, you'll get this. I'm sure you guys have seen this before, but let me just kind of talk about this message that's popping up. It says the cursor is on a different line from where you started the program, because I went in and edited it, and so I had paused it somewhere in the program, which if you actually look, it tells you right up here, clockwise line 3. So it tells you I was on line 3, but then I got up to line 1, and it's asking me, do I want to start at line 1? So I'm just going to say yes and start it from the top. Okay, so I'm going to hit enter. And then I'm going to do a shift forward again then, and it'll start from there. So as you see here, what this is doing is it's going around the program, or it's going around the rectangle. It's waiting 1.2 seconds, and it's going around the program again. Okay. So, but now I'm going to, the big difference here is the count up program. So I'm going to switch to this count up program and the countdown program. We're going to take a look and see what those are doing. All right, so here we have count up. Oh, looks like I modified the wrong one. This one was supposed to be counting up. And it's not really counting up per se. What it's doing is putting values 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the corresponding registers. So might not have been the best name for this program, but this program is supposed to count, or it's supposed to go put 1 in register 1, 2 in register 2, 3 in register 3, 4 in register 4, and 5 in register 5. Okay, and then the countdown program is supposed to be going the opposite way. So register 1 is going to be 5, and register 2 is going to be 4, and register 3 is 3, but register 4 would be 2, and register 5 would be a 1. And again, it's technically, it's not really counting down. All I'm really doing is assigning numbers 1 through 5 to the first 5 registers, either in a forward direction, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, so that's all these two count up, count down programs are doing. They're taking 1 through 5 and shoving it into those 5 registers. Okay, and so if we go to the dual screen setting now, so if we go to the dual screen, you can see when I pop back over here, I'm going to run the clockwise program. All right, and I know it's a little bit harder to see that. This is weird. I hooked an external monitor to this laptop, and so I've got the blackboard on the laptop, and on the external monitor I've got the RoboGuide software, and I'm trying to click in the blackboard screen instead of the RoboGuide software, so it's kind of weird. But all right, so I'm just going to run through this program now, and what I want you to kind of notice there, is as it runs, it's on line 6 right now. I'm going to hit step for a minute. So I'm at line 6, and then it goes to line 7. So when it goes to line 7, then it jumps into the count up program. All right, so look at the registers over here on the right hand side, right? The register 1 is 5, register 2 is 4, so it goes 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. But now over here, what this program is going to do is 1 line at a time, it's going to go through and just change register 1 to 1, register 2 to 2, 3 to 3, 4 to 4, and 5 to 5. All right, so it's run through this count up program. So now my registers are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I'm at the end of this program, so it's going to return back to the main program. So now I'm going to run that line, which is just a wait line, and then it's going to move to point 1, which technically it's at point 1, so it's just going to move on there. All right, then it moves to point 2, point 3, point 4, back to point 1, and now it's going to count down, it's going to call the countdown program. So it calls the countdown program, which is going to put 5 in register 1, 4 in register 2, and so on, one at a time. Now it's only doing those one at a time, okay? So boom, 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 it does those each one at a time. You hit the end of this program, you return back to the clockwise program that called it. You wait 1.2 seconds, you jump up to label 1, and you just repeat through that, okay? And so if I take step off and I run it with step off, notice, right, these numbers over here in the registers, boom, they're changing in a heartbeat, right? Because the robot doesn't have to move the arm to do it. So it's executing this entire count up program and the entire count down program in just like 1 or 2 microseconds. All right, it's just like boom, flying through there. All right, so so that's what this program is doing. Okay, so we've got the clockwise program, which is just going around, and then we have it's calling this count up program or this countdown program. Okay, so on the other hand, if I wanted to, I could simply I could just do my select, come over here and call the down program, all right, and execute just the down program, right? So here on the left-hand side is the program I'm going to execute. And to hit forward, by the way, you have to have this side selected. And then I can, we look at the registers. Now, I haven't ran the program yet, so the registers are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm going to come over here, hold down the shift key, hit forward, and of course, when I do that, I get the infamous program 040 already locked by another task program because I was actually executing the clockwise program. So remember function, press 1 or just select that, abort all. That'll abort the program you were in. Then you can come over and hit your forward, and I guess I got to hit reset first. But then I can hit forward and it'll run through this program. Now, I don't know if you guys were watching when I clicked on that, but it ran through that program so fast that you didn't see it. But you can see looking over here at the data now that it's going down, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. All right, so, and then again, if I come over here and I go to select and select the count up program, and do shift forward, okay? Now there, it finished, because when I ran the countdown program, it ran all 5 lines, which there's only 5 lines, so it ran all 5 lines, and then it was done. And so therefore, I didn't have to do the function 1 and force an abort all, because I didn't stop the program somewhere in the middle. The program had completed, okay? So that's why I didn't have to do a function 1 abort all right there. Okay, so, but you see when I did hit forward, it ran through, and now my data registers are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 again, because it's made them go in an up fashion, okay? So these are just a couple of ordinary Teach Pendant programs here. So is there any questions about those before I go on? Okay. So these were not macros. These are just ordinary Teach Pendant programs, but I'm going to be kind of showing you some different aspects with these, what we can do if they were macros. So I just want to make sure everybody understands the programs themselves. We got the 3 programs, the clockwise program, which goes clockwise around the rectangle, the count down program, which sets the registers 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, or the count up, which sets them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit about a macro. A macro is an ordinary Teach Pendant program, as these three that we've been discussing so far are. All right, so these are just ordinary programs. All right, so they're just ordinary programs. So if we get on one of these, it doesn't matter. I'll look at all of them maybe. Remember, if you come over here, you click your next button. All right, and I guess I was on that screen. So if you hit next, it toggles your soft keys. And so what we can do here is we can come over to the detail, and we can look at the details. And I'm going to just flip back to a single screen because it just displays a little bit larger here. All right. And so we hit detail. And when you look at this detail, we talked a little bit about this before. It has the creation date and modification date. If you copied it from somewhere else, they tell you what the name of the program was you copied it from. And then it has, of course, the name. You could edit the name here if you wanted to. But the big deal here is your subtype. All right. So your subtype right now, was just set to none. But I could make it a macro if I wanted. Okay, so I could make this a macro. And then there's the group mask. I could also put a comment for the program if I wanted, but then there's the group mask. So the group mask, we talked about the groups before. I believe it was like chapter 4, we're talking about the robot in general. So the robot, depending on the model of the robot, it can handle up to like 40 axes, or even the newer ones all the way up to 72 axes. So what we've got is we've got 8 groups. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? So there's 8 groups here. And each group could have a possibility of up to 9 axes within that. Okay. Now, the one, when you look here, you have 2 choices under the group mask. Your choices are either, my shift mode. You know why it's not letting me? Oh, I know why it's not letting me do that. I'm trying to get to the group mask. You notice how the line numbers are 1, 2, 3, blank, 4. It won't let me get to the group mask, okay? But my choices on the group mask are either a 1 or a star. If it's a star, then that means that this program is not going to move any of the axes within that particular group, all right? If it's a 1, then that means that this program might move one of the axes, okay? But if you look here, it won't let me go in there and change that. I'm like, what's going on here? Well, let me select one of the other programs. I'm going to let's go back to the previous. Let's go back to the count up or count down program. We'll look at count down first because it's alphabetical. So remember this here, there's no motion instructions here, right? These are just working with data registers. There's no actual motion happening here. So if I go back to select and now hit detail, notice the group mask is number 4. All right, so this will actually let me get in here to the group mask. And so now here in the group mask, I can change this to a star. And what that means is that this program, which is the countdown program, I'm telling it, it's not allowed to move any axis in any group. which means that this program, it can run, it can do whatever it wants as long as it doesn't want to move the actual robotic arm. Okay, and so that's what this group mask piece means. If I put a star here, it says you're not allowed to move. Okay, so remember, the countdown program isn't moving anything anyhow. Okay, so the countdown program is just storing data into registers, storing values into the register. That's all it does. It's not moving the arm. And that's why under detail, it actually lets me go in here and choose this. Okay, so now that I've put a star under group mask, if I come in here to the program, notice it gives me instructions and edit commands, but there's no next. The next button here doesn't move me over to the other point, to the other soft key choices, which are point and touch. Okay. So, and the reason for that is because those are motion instructions, right? If you select that point, right? Like if we go back over to the clockwise program, for instance, and look at this program, right? Now I've got the next button, and I've got these choices of either a point or to touch up a point. All right, but these are the motion instructions, which means that the robot arm has to move. Since I've declared that the countdown program is not allowed to move an axis, when I go into the countdown program, I don't have the next, so all I have is I can do instruction sort of stuff, or I can edit what I already have there. Okay, so those are my only two choices in that program. Now notice, if we come back and look at the detail of this, I haven't marked this as a macro. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and change this now and declare it as a macro. Now it's still the same program it always was, which means if I go back to my original clockwise program, okay, so if I go back to the original clockwise program and select this and execute it, this program will work just fine. Okay, so I'm calling the call up, and then I'm going to come down and it's going to make a call. Now it's going to make a call to the countdown program and run through the countdown program just as it did before, because it's still a Teach Pendant program. So if it's a Teach Pendant program, you can always use the call and call that other Teach Pendant program. So from one Teach Pendant program to another Teach Pendant program, you can just call it and execute it. Simple as that. Okay, so, but what makes it different now as a macro, now remember, I've actually declared the clockwise program as a macro also. So remember, this guy I've also declared as a macro. And so now what I can do is I can go to my menu, and under menu, there's something called manual macros. And they tell you here, set the program to MF in the macro screen. Now, this is kind of confusing to me. I never quite understood this. When you come here, you're going to manual functions. Okay, so you're going to number 3, manual functions. Oh, okay. It doesn't say macros there, but what this screen is giving you is a list of macros that you have defined in the MF screen. So let's go to the MF screen. Now the MF screen is under setup. So if we come down to setup, now there's a a separate screen that says macro. This is the macro configuration. All right, and it's called macro command. But the MF is the manual function. So you see these are listed as manual functions over here. But you notice that the program, under the program column, there's nothing. All right, and so what I'm going to do here is, first thing I'm going to do is edit this. Okay, and so I'm just going to call this, I'm going to label this something like, this is going to be the countdown macro here. So this is going to be the countdown macro. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, on this countdown macro, I'm going to make this countdown registers. Okay. And then I'm going to come over here now into the program, and notice I have a choice. And under choice, I can select macros. And so I can choose my countdown macro. So this is my countdown macro, and I'm going to make this the first choice, MF1. Okay. So now, if I come back to my clockwise program, so now I'm in the clockwise program, all right? And here's this call to the countdown. And this program will work exactly as it is. However, now that I've went into that macro setup screen, I can now make a direct reference without using the call. So, here, one of the kind of nice things about the macro screens, if I come over here to the manual functions now, you'll see this instruction is now countdown registers. So instead of being this abbreviated, remember, Teach Pendant names, you're only allowed 8 characters. So the best I could do was like something like CNT_down, and then I put the M there to mean macro. All right, but I only had 8 characters to work with. So it wasn't very well labeled. But under the manual function screen now, I defined it with this much longer explanation of what this macro is. Okay, and I've assigned it. So it doesn't say not assigned now, because I did assign it. So now, and if I wanted to, I could just, boom, execute it right here. However, I can still execute it from the main, from the clockwise program through this call. Or now, if I come back over to instruction, one of the choices under instruction there it is macro. And so now this will allow me to select the macro using that longer, more explained name. Okay, so this allows me to do it using this longer explained name. So now, instead of it just being call this kind of cryptic count underscore DWNM, okay, well, what was that? Well, now it says we're going to count down the registers. All right, so this here is actually the execution of a macro here that I was able to label and explain myself. It makes the program a little bit easier to run, and maybe it's just a little smoother than the call and then calling this program name. So is there any questions about that? So that's only one of the features of the macro, but this program is going to run through here. Let me go back to the dual screen so we can see it run. Okay, I'll go to the double screen, and this thing runs so fast. I think I'm going to change my wait time to 2.5 seconds, just to give it a little bit more time so we can look and talk about it as it's running here. So I'm going to just increase those a little bit. But now So now when I run this program, you can see it's counting down, counting up, counting down, counting up, counting down. So, and if I come over and I hit the play button, right? So if I hit the play button here, it will run in auto mode, right? And okay. So just trying to slow the arm down just a little bit more too. Whoa, way too much. All right, so there it is. It's running, and so we can see it's doing the call of the count up program 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then it does the countdown macro 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. So is everybody okay with this? Any questions? Give you a few seconds to type something in if you want here, or anytime you have as I'm going along, if you have a question, just type it in there. All right, so that is the macro setting. So to do that, again, let me review. I went to setup, and then under setup was macro, and that's where I configure the macro. Okay. Go back to the big screen for a little bit. All right, so I configure it there, and then once I configure it, if I label it as an MF over here, then it'll show over here under manual functions. I still don't understand why this doesn't say like manual functions, macros or something. It's, they had more room there, but they didn't put that. All right, so then the rest of these are not currently assigned, okay? But I can come back in here and I could assign the other programs in here. So anything that's declared as a macro. Now, let's go to the count up program a minute. The count up program is not a macro. Okay, so the count up program, A, is not a macro, and B, it has a group mask setting. Now, if we look at it, it's actually not moving. It's not moving any joints. It's not moving any servos. It's not moving anything. All it's doing is putting information into data registers. But looking at the detail, it's allowed to move something. Okay, so remember that. So then if we look at the detail, back at the detail of the countdown, the countdown, I declare it is not allowed to move anything. Okay, now for the way I did that macro call inside of the program, it doesn't matter whether the macro was moving anything or not. But we're going to see these keys over here in a few seconds here. I'm going to look at these keys on the Teach Pendant. So when we go to the macro setup, okay, so the countdown program is declared as a macro, and it's not allowed to move anything. Okay, but the count up is not currently defined as a macro. So the count up program is not declared as a macro. So let's take a look at that, and I'm going to go to manual functions, and under manual, or not manual functions, the macro setup. I'm going to go to macro setup, and I'm going to come down to the second one, and this is going to be, where'd my screen go? Keyboard. Okay, this is going to be count up registers. Okay, and so I'm going to declare this, and then I'm going to come over here, and this is macro number 2, and I'm going to select choice here. Now, when I select the choice, Notice the count up, even though count up is not declared as a macro, it shows up here. So I'm going to go ahead and select it. All right, so I've selected it, and that's manual function 2. All right, and so now I'm going to go back to the select and look at the detail of the count up program. Boom, it's now a macro. Okay, so it was not a macro, but when I went into the macro configuration and I assigned it to that manual function screen, the only way a program can be in the manual function screen is if that program is a macro. So it automatically came back and changed the subtype to macro when I assigned it to that screen. All right, so so if we return here, so now when I come in to the clockwise program, and on this, again, I was doing a call here, but now if I come over here, I can go to the macro, and then I can do the count up registers. Okay, so here then we have the count up register and the count down register. And so if we flip over to the double display just to watch the registers change as we run through the program. Okay. Hello, are we moving? All right, so there it goes. It runs the count up registers 1 through 5. Then it runs the count down registers 5 through 1. And so the only difference here now is now I'm calling them using this longer name that I set up inside of the manual function screen. Okay. All right, so now just to kind of show you here, if I come to the manual function screen and I select the count down, actually I'm going to select the count up because it's already going down. So I select the count down macro and hit execute, or excuse me, I selected count up. It doesn't execute unless I hold down the shift key. So shift execute, and it won't run. Run request failed, locked by another task. That's because I was in the middle of the clockwise, so function 1, abort all. And try it again to see reset and execute. So there, boom, it ran the count up program. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then if I pop back up to this one and execute that, oops. Shift execute to run the program. I thought I was. Oh, okay, it did it. Okay, it ran that time. I didn't. All right, so if I execute, come up here and execute the down, come back, hit execute the up, and so I can execute any macros on this manual function screen. You can just come to the manual function screen and execute if you want. Although honestly, I normally don't do that, but it could be convenient at times. One of the things that we can do, I haven't really talked too much about this, but under the function menu, if you go to next, one of the choices is this thing called quick or full menus. And I do remember mentioning this because sometimes when you're trying to do an abort all, you somehow accidentally get to the second part of this screen. So this is function 1. This is the first menu screen. and then you go to the second one, and that's where that quick full menu is, and then you turn on your quick menus. If you turn on quick menus here, then what happens now when I go to the menu, my menu choices are shorter. Okay, so there's no setup under the second screen here. And it also, by the way, tells you that you're under quick 1 and quick 2. All right, but you do have the manual functions. So this is kind of something that you can set up for your actual operators on the line, and you can set up some macros that they can come in here and run, and then you can put the robot in this quick menu mode, and to get back out, you just flip back over here to quick menus again and toggle it, and it toggles back off, and then your menu is back to the normal menu. All right, but the idea with the quick menus is that it's kind of used for operators, so they can't get to everything and mess up something critical. Okay, and you can actually go in and set a password, so when you're in quick menus and you want to flip back to full menus, you have to enter in a passcode. I think it's only like a 4-digit passcode, but it's kind of a security thing to prevent. Most operators don't try to do anything crazy, but there's always, seems like, you know, every company has at least one operator who wants to go in and start messing with stuff, even though they haven't been trained on it, so they have no idea what they're doing. And so, you know, usually that results in big problems. And so that's the idea of these quick menus. Okay. All right. Now, so this is the manual functions screen. But to set that, remember we had to go to setup, and then under setup we went to macro. However, under macro, we have some other things we can do here. Okay. And so let's take a look here. Down here, I got this one. I just kind of named ADEF, kind of a dumb name, I guess. But I'm just going to come over here. I'm going to rename this, and I'll be, I'm going to label this key up, I think. So this is going to be like key up. Okay. And so this is key up. And the one right below it, I'm going to call key down. All right. And the one below that, I think I'm going to name shift clockwise. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do here is the key up program is going to execute the count up program. The key down program is going to execute the count down program, and the shift clockwise is going to execute the clockwise program. So when we come over to configuration here, I'm going to, here under choice, I'm going to hit choice, and I'm going to select this is the up program. And then for the next one, I'm going to choose choice, and that's going to be the down program. And for this third one, I'm going to hit choice, and that's going to be the clockwise program. Okay. So those are the programs that are going to run. Now, since I added, well, actually I added it before, right? So these are all now listed as macros. Okay. But now over here, instead of doing the MF over in this screen, I'm going to put user key. I'm going to go to choice, and I'm going to select a user key 1. Okay, so user key, and I'm going to come over here and I'm going to make this user key 1, and it's going to say no. All right, so you see down here I got the message, you can't do that. Well, wait a minute. Okay, so let me come over to the down program here, I'm going to select user key, and I'm going to give it number 2. I'll give it a number. I guess I'll give it number 1 just for a second to show you I can do it. All right, but I actually want to make that 2. Now, we talked about these user keys. I'm going to have to toggle my iPendant here so I can see the keys a little bit better. All right, so we talked about these user keys way back in chapter 5. We talked about the Teach Pendant, and we talked about these. Now, these keys, some of them, like the I/O button, shows you the I/O, right? So we talked about that on Monday, right? And we can view I/O, and we can force it on and off with this I/O button. The position button, we've talked about, it shows you the current joint positions, either in joint mode, user frame, or world frame. Okay, so we talked about all of these buttons here, or at least some of them. I don't really use status or setup, but the setup pops me into the setup screen. Okay, so the pressing setup is like hitting menu and then going to setup. Okay, same thing. So these are just some shortcut buttons. However, we can override any of these buttons. Okay, so tool 1 and tool 2 straight out of the factory don't do anything. Okay, but we can program them to do whatever we want. And so what I just did right here is on the key down line on line 10, I programmed user key 2, which is tool 2. I programmed that to run the down program. Okay, and so that's what this does. So if I come over here and look at my data screen for a minute, the data is going up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now I programmed it so when I press tool 2, it's going to be 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Well, when I changed teach, it turned my Teach Pendant off on me over here. So I have to, these buttons here, these 7 buttons, we can assign to any macro we want. However, to use those buttons only work when the Teach Pendant is turned on. If the Teach Pendant is turned off, and these are assigned to macros, they won't do anything. Okay, but when they're turned on, I can come over here, and now again it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up here. But as soon as I hit tool 2, boom, it executes the countdown program, so it now says 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. Any questions? Everybody's really quiet there today. Yeah, I just put you all to sleep on you and had your afternoon nap. Okay, so but when I went to setup, right, and I tried to configure this, okay, and I'll switch back to the Teach Pendant here so you can see that. But before I do that, just let me again point out these 7 starting here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Actually, it's 5, 6, and 7. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I can tie any or all of these 7 keys to a macro of my choosing. Okay, just as I did with tool 2. So again, if we come in here and look at data, I'm just going to change a couple of these numbers. Okay, so it doesn't matter what these numbers are. Okay, as soon as I press tool 2, it executes the macro, which returns them to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, because that's what that particular macro does. Typically, what we do with these macros is we use them to open or shut grippers. All right, so we create a little program that'll activate the gripper and either turn it on or off, depending on how you set it up. But with the RoboGuide software here, it's kind of hard to it's kind of hard to okay, so all right, lower hand.
Can you hear me, Dr. Hartman?
Ah, yes, I hear you now. Yes.
Why couldn't you assign tool 1 or tool 2 to the other user key?
I'm sorry, said it tool 1 or tool 2 to the other user key. What is
Yeah. Whenever you tried to, you have two macros. Well, two macros. One's called up key and one calls down key. But you couldn't assign one to up key.
Yes, great question. The reason for that, let me flip back to the other Teach Pendant because it's a little bit easier to see, I think, on the screen for you. All right, so when we flip back, when we go to the macro setup, okay, yeah, so this is, you were like saying, why was I not able to assign macro, the count up macro to key 1, which would be tool 1? That's your question. Okay, so the reason for that is that group mask I've been talking about. That's why I've been carrying on about the group mask so much. So if we come into select, we select the up, okay, and the if we look at the detail of it, right, the group mask here, the group mask is a 1, which says that this program is allowed to move the arm. So the robotic arm can move. Okay. Now, I just said a moment ago that the Teach Pendant has to be turned on for these. If you assign a macro to these 7 buttons for that macro to do anything, this Teach Pendant must be turned on. So think about it a little bit when you're jogging or teaching the robot. What do you have to do to get the robot arm to move? I'll just put that out there, and anybody can type in an answer or click on the raise hand and speak and tell me, what do you have to do to get the robotic arm to move? Exactly. You have to hold down the shift. You also have to hold the dead man also, right? But you have to hold down the shift. And so what this group mask with a 1 here, it says that the first 9 axes, which of course we only have 6, the 6 axes of the robot, but these 6 axes are allowed to move, even though my program doesn't move them, right? The program is not moving them, but according to this mask, my program is allowed to move them. And therefore, you can't just come over and press tool 1, you have to also press the shift key, okay? And so that's why when I went to the setup there, it would not allow me to assign it. So if I come back here to detail, and under detail, I come over to the group mask, and I'm going to turn that off. All right, so now under group mask, that's turned off, and then I'm going to go back to my setup screen. And now in my setup screen here, I am allowed to assign it to tool 1. Okay, so yeah, so the reason I could not assign the key up program to tool 1 was because according to the details, it was allowed to move the robotic arm. Even though the program wasn't moving the robotic arm, the configuration said it was allowed to, which would mean that I would have to be holding down the shift key, and so therefore it would not let me do that. So now if we pop over to the data screen, if I press tool 1, I get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I press tool 2, I get 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. So hopefully that clears up why it would not allow me to do that and how we can modify it to do that. Okay. All right. Okay, so given that, let's take a look at the other program, the clockwise program. All right, so the clockwise program, it's declared as a macro, but it is also set as a group mask. But remember, I can't come to the group mask and change it, right? It's skipping over that. So I can't change the group mask because this program is moving the arm. All right, so for me to change the group mask of this program, I'd first have to come in and delete all motion instructions, which I don't want to do. So this program will not, I cannot assign the clockwise program to any of these 7 keys here. Okay, however, there's a second set. So if we go back to the config screen, when I come over here, so again, if I come over here, if I set my choice to user K, and then I try to come over here to the number and push a number, I get that error message. Can't assign motion program. Okay, notice the first error message I got, I tried to assign it to 1, but 1 was already assigned. So that's the double definition that it's giving me. But if I try to assign it to, say, button 3, which would be the move menu, I can't do that because for this program to run, you must be holding down the shift key. However, if I come over to choice, and under choice I select SU, now I can assign this to button 1 or button 2 or button 3. So this, what I've done is I've assigned it to tool 1 with the shift key. Okay, so now if I come over here and I hold down the shift key, you can see it flashing there as I press the shift key. All right, I hold down the shift key and I press tool 1. Now the program is running. And you can see the line number it's on up here as the program is running. Okay, and if I click over to data, right, we remember that the clockwise program goes around the box and then calls either the up or the down depending on which line it was on, because it goes around the box, calls the up program, and then goes around the box again and calls the down program. All right, but still notice I have to be holding down the shift key because it is moving the robotic arm. All right. All right, so that is the work. The Teach Pendant has to be turned on. If I turn the Teach Pendant off, Shift Tool will not run because, and you get an error message up here. Always remember to look at your Teach Pendant and look at the messages up here, because a lot of times they're telling you why it's not doing what you thought it was supposed to be doing. And so it tells you that. It's like I'm trying to hit this, but I'm getting macro error 5 because my Teach Pendant is disabled. I enable the Teach Pendant, I hit Shift and hit Tool 1, and it'll execute. Okay. All right, but before we're almost done here with the macros, but I just want to point out just a couple other ones there. So under Setup Macro, if you come over here to Choices, there's a couple other really cool choices. One of them is the digital input. Okay, so what this means is that you can have some sensor, and as a part comes down the line or whatever, and it sees the part sitting there or moving past or whatever, you can call a macro. That macro might just be a counter macro that it just, you know, adds one showing, okay, another part went down the line, just tracking how many are going down the line. Or you may actually have it execute an actual program. Okay, so you've got this digital input. When the digital input is true, it'll execute that macro. Okay, or another choice would be a robot input. Okay, or a UI input, which if you remember from Monday, UI was basically a PLC or an HMI input. So you could execute macros from an HMI screen or from have the PLC make a call, set a value that would be fed in through the PLC configuration, and that could also execute this macro. Okay, so those are the advantages of macros. So again, macros are ordinary Teach Pendant programs. We create them the same way as the other programs we've been creating. The only extra we do is we go into the detail and declare it as a macro, which is kind of done automatically when we come to this configure line and add it. All right, but the advantages here are, number one, just as a manual function. We can put it on the manual function screen. We can give it a longer name, and then we can call it using the macro instruction, which gives it that longer, more descriptive name inside of the program as we had over here, right? So we had, instead of just CNT UP, we have count up registers or whatever. So it just makes the program a little bit easier to read what it's going to do here when it's executing this macro. Or we can tie them. We can tie them to either one of these 7 user keys, or shift one of these 7 user keys, but also press the shift button, which also allows it to move. Or we can tie it to an input, so when a digital input goes true. Okay, so yeah, so to Matt's question, yeah, if I want, like on the robots we have in the classroom, I mentioned on Monday, the real input is the 101. Okay, so digital input 101, the very first sensor that we got connected up to the real robots is input 101, digital input 101. All right, and so I'm going to, now the shift clockwise macro is tied to that digital input. So now watch this. If I turn off the Teach Pendant and I go to data, or not data, excuse me, I go to IO, menu IO. So I'm going to go to my IO screen, my digital IO, and I'm going to hit item and go to 101. All right, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here. We talked a little bit about, I need to be on input. Sorry, that it always defaults to the output screen. Item 101. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to simulate it. I think it will want, yeah. On this particular robot, 101 is not defined. It's just start out, so I can't do that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to come back to my macro screen, and you see 105 is defined. So I'm going to come to 105, set up macro. I'm going to define it to 105. Okay, so now, okay, so I made that 105. Now notice my Teach Pendant is off, but it allowed me to modify this screen even though my Teach Pendant was off. And so then I'm going to go back to my IO screen. And I'm going to come down to 105. And under 105, I'm going to select Simulate. Okay. And I guess I can't simulate with the Teach Pendant off, maybe. All right, so I guess I can't really demonstrate this Or, oh, wait, there we go. I guess maybe I can. Okay. I just need to be on the right spot. All right, so now it runs the program. Okay. I forgot this program doesn't stop, does it? Okay. So, yeah, so it was running the program forever there. Yeah, this one doesn't have the. All right, so what I'm going to do here is just delete this line. So it only runs a program once. Okay, so, and then I'm going to come back to my I/O, digital I/O, and I'm still in simulation mode. Okay, so when the part comes down the line and it triggers sensor 105, so 105 turns on, and then the program runs. Now notice that even though, so the program ran, let's say that the program was actually coming over and picking up the part. So I'm going to hit on, and then I'm immediately hitting off again. But notice it runs through the entire program. Right? Once it starts that macro, it runs through that entire macro. Okay. All right. So the and then I'm going to come back over here and unsimulate it. Okay. So, but those are some of the really cool things about macros compared to the ordinary Teach Pendant programs. You can still call them like an ordinary one, but like I say, the cool things is we can either tie them to these keys, or we can tie them to a digital input, a robot input, or a PLC input. All right, so so the last thing I just wanted to discuss today was a little bit about some of the miscellaneous instructions that we can add to a program. So if we come in here and we go to instruction, okay, and let's just kind of go over this menu. I haven't really spent too much time on it. And some of this stuff is dependent on the type of software, extra software options that you have installed. So some of the things you see on this particular robot may not be on a different robot, because it's dependent on the actual type of hitting the wrong key here. But so registers will always be there. You're always going to have registers. We kind of looked at those last time, right? We can come in here, we can add or subtract, multiply or divide on our registers. Okay. I/O, we looked at that on Monday. I/O will let us view various I/O. The if select, that allows us to use if statements or select statements. We kind of talked about those a couple weeks ago. The wait statement, the jump, the call, actually pretty much everything on this screen is always there. Okay. But when we look at some of these other screens here, like there's a skip, will allow you under certain conditions to skip over another thing. We talked about payload. We talked about offsets and setting our frames. But some of these others here, like PC Vision, okay, this is only an option if you have that particular software installed. Okay, so some of these on these ladder screens here only apply if you have the correct software. But under the miscellaneous here on the main page, there's a couple of things that we can do. One of them is a timer. Okay, so we can actually set up a timer. You have to kind of go into the variables or whatever. There's multiple timers that you can set, and then you can kind of set this timer and have it count down or whatever before something occurs. Another choice would be remark. I talked about remarks. Remarks are basically comments. Okay, some of these aren't really going to talk about it here in the class, but so we had the remark, the message. Okay, now your book does talk about the message on page, if you have your book open here, it's in chapter 17. It does talk about the message. See. Okay, so they talk about the timer, and they talk about, okay, so the timer instruction is on page 297 in your book there. So, you select timer, and there's 20 timers, and you can do a start, stop, or reset is the action. So when you select that timer, your choices. Let's see. Instruction, miscellaneous, timer. This is the timer 1 through 20, and then your choices there are to either start the timer, stop the timer, or to reset the timer. Okay. The override instruction overrides the speed of the. Okay, so the override overrides the speed of your motion instructions. Okay, the remark I talked about is just a comment, and then and that's on page 298, the remark and the message instruction. So the message instruction, what you can do is you can use it to basically almost kind of as a logging tool, so you can send messages to the message screen. Okay. All right, so you select message here, and the message, you come in here and you can put in your message or whatever. All right, and then when it executes this program, okay, so I'm just going to execute this one line though. It pops up onto this user screen a message. Okay, so that's what the message button does. It's it can maybe sometimes be useful for kind of giving some information, but this is the user screen here. So to get if you were, let's see, if I do a shift. What was it? Shift tool 1 will run the macro. Okay. Okay, so shift. I just want to go to a different screen here for a minute. I don't care what screen it is. Okay, so shift tool 1. Not running my macro here for some reason. Okay. My arm's not moving, but anyhow, to see that screen, to get back to that screen where the messages are sent, you go to menu, and then just on the first choice there, it's user. So that's where that screen is to see what message is displayed. All right, so that's pretty much the end of the book. Okay, so like I say, I will be on 12 o'clock on Monday, or at least I'm planning on being on at that time, and just kind of maybe have it open to questions if you want to ask questions about different things, or I'll just kind of maybe review the exam. And then next Wednesday will be the exam. It'll be on Blackboard. So it'll be kind of like the homeworks and quizzes. So you definitely want to like study the homeworks and quizzes and review all that. Review the first exam, and since it's going to be on Blackboard, you're going to be sitting at home. It's open book. I'm certainly not going to be standing behind you watching. So the exam will be open book. So don't feel guilty. Oh, I had to look that up in the book. Oh, that's all right. When you're out on the job, sometimes you got to open a book or look something up out on the job too. So I'm perfectly fine with that. Okay. All right, but so that covers the macros. Excuse me. That covers the macros, and we talked Monday about the I/O, and so like I say, we pretty much have completed the book. The rest of the the rest of the class officially is supposed to be a project. So if if it looks like we're not going to be back in the classroom, I will make available that evaluation copy that I talked about on Monday. There's an evaluation copy of the RoboGuide software that you'll need a Windows computer to run, and I'll make that available to you if you don't have very good high bandwidth. It's a pretty large program. Of course, if you're on today, then you probably got enough bandwidth for it. But if not, if I have to, I can mail a CD to you or something like that. DVD actually. So hopefully you have an optical drive to put it in. But if I have to, I'll burn it to a DVD and mail it to you to make sure you get it. Okay. Yeah, I'll talk a little bit on Monday about the project and the proposal here to see, because I don't know, I'll see if anything changes between now and Monday, because I'm really kind of thinking that at this point in the game, depending on what the governor's got to say over the next week, if it looks like we're not going to be back in the classroom till late April, then I think I'll just try to make sure everybody gets a copy of this RoboGuide software and allow you to work on and I'll just maybe put up some exercises. So we might not be able to do a full project. Now, I don't know, some of you, I know a couple of you were actually also in the tech project, and you were planning on doing something with the robot with your tech project piece too. So yeah, we may have to discuss that separately, and I'll talk to the department chair and dean and see what they have. They're working on some different ideas there, but I'm not quite sure what we'll be able to do with that. So I'll be thinking about that over the weekend and so. Okay. Oh yeah, Austin. I was going to say something to you about that. Do you need that? We can certainly think you labeled it pretty well. You know, I'm sure you could like swing by school and we could have the assistant drop it off so we could set up a time if we needed to for you to go to school, and she could go into 205 and bring it out to you. Oh, you were going to use that big conveyor belt, weren't you? The one that the other student had put together? Okay. Yeah. Okay.